Oberleutnant Franz Baron von Werra was a German Luftwaffe ace who came to New York City in 1941 and was treated like a visiting celebrity. He was born into a noble but poor Swiss family in 1914. He joined the Luftwaffe in 1936. He was a dashing playboy, a showboat and braggart who delighted the Nazi press by keeping a lion cub named Simba at his squadron's aerodrome and telling heroic tales about the numbers of enemy planes he'd shot down. They dubbed him the Red Devil and the Terror of the RAF. He was intelligent, resourceful, and physically tough. His remarkable exploits, dramatized in the mid-50s book and movie The One That Got Away, began in September 1940 when a Spitfire pilot shot down his Messerschmitt onto a field in Kent, where an unarmed cook from a nearby searchlight battery apprehended him. He made his first failed escape attempt just days later. He was then sent to a POW camp in the Lancashire countryside. There, he made a more successful try, slipping away from a group of prisoners who were taken out for exercise. Crossing moors and woods, trying to reach the coast, living on apples he picked up from the ground, he evaded a manhunt for 3 cold, wet days and nights. In a new camp in Derbyshire, he and other Luftwaffe pilots managed a bold getaway straight out of The Great Escape, tunneling their way out, equipped with disguises and false papers created in the camp. Posing as a Dutch pilot with the RAF, von Werra bluffed his way to an airfield and was actually in the cockpit of a parked Hurricane when an RAF officer stopped him at gunpoint. In January 1941, the British shipped von Werra and other troublesome German POWs to their allies in Canada, where, even if they did escape, they'd have to cross the Atlantic to get back into the fight. Von Werra jumped out a window of the train taking them from Montreal to the camp. He landed in a snowbank. Then, despite the deep cold, he trekked on foot to the ice-clogged St. Lawrence River. He stole a rowboat, dragged it across ice and snow to the water, and then floated, rudderless and without paddles, until he reached the ice pack at the other shore. There, he hitched a ride into the riverfront town of Ogdensburg, New York, and surrendered to the police. It was still 11 months before the United States would enter World War II. Having made it into this neutral country, von Werra presumed he was safe from Canadian authorities. The next day, the Ogdenburg police station was jammed with reporters and photographers who had raced up from New York City. Baron von Werra put on a grand show for them, strutting and bragging so outrageously that one reporter dubbed him Baron Munchausen. In his photo in the New York Times the next day, he grinned broadly, the white bandages on his frostbitten ears sticking out comically. He was allowed to call the German consulate in New York City, which promptly posted his bail on a charge of entering the country without going through proper immigration procedures. He was whisked away 1 hour before Canadian authorities could serve him with a summons for stealing the rowboat. That charge carried only a $35 fine, but would have required him to return to Canada, where he'd be reapprehended. In New York City, the German consul general instructed von Werra to stop showing off for the press, but he couldn't keep the 26-year-old out of the nightclubs and Broadway theaters. Gossip columnists made a game of spotting him as he lived it up. He accepted invitations to parties and dinners. As a London Times headline put it, escaped Hun Baron, women's pet in U.S. Meanwhile, in Washington, The British, German, and Canadian governments were all lobbying to have von Werra handed over to them. Neutrality prohibited the Americans from giving escaped prisoners back to their captors. But at the same time, American authorities were reluctant to send an experienced fighter pilot back to the Luftwaffe to wreak more havoc on our friends in England. Von Werra's situation came to a head on March 22nd, when two other German POWs in Canada escaped and crossed the frozen St. Lawrence on foot, entering Ogdensburg, chased by Canadian police. After a few hours, they were handed over to the Canadians. A Justice Department official in Washington suggested that von Werra might soon be handed back as well. At that, he disappeared. Nothing was seen or heard of him until a month later, April 23, when the newspapers announced that he was believed to be in Peru, trying to arrange passage to Germany. He was, in fact, already in Germany. On instructions from Berlin, the consulate had helped him sneak out of New York. He traveled by train, alone and unnoticed, to El Paso. There, disguising himself as a Mexican worker, he walked across the bridge over the Rio Grande into Juarez. He caught another train to Mexico City. There, the German embassy gave him the false passport he used to take a series of international flights that brought him eventually to Berlin. Hitler personally awarded him the Iron Cross. Von Werra was back in a Messerschmitt by summer, posted to coastal defense in Holland. In October 1941, his plane developed engine trouble and crashed into the sea. It was, evidently, the one situation the Red Devil could not escape from. His body was never found.